primeira manja.
We're going to place our stencil now, and as much as on the artificial skin as on real skin, we always have to apply this pressure over the stencil and hold it for a while to make sure a good amount of pigment has been transferred to the artificial or to the real skin. From paper to skin, you can feel that there's some sort of the adherence. It's like the paper is glued to the skin, and you can then peel it off. You can see the stencil applied now. And now we're going to take the excess of the stencil and the stencil liquid off the fake skin. You would also do the same on real skin. So if you have a client, you'll be doing the same. After applying the stencil, you're going to put a sheet of kitchen towel and you're going to put some pressure on. And when you take it off, there's some pigment and some excess on the sheet, on the paper. And then you clean around that too. Because we're working on fake skin, artificial skin, it has a worse adherence to the stencil. So I've been trying many different things. One thing that helped is to leave overnight or to leave for a few hours, or even use a blow dryer, a hair dryer, and the heat will help to keep the stencil on. Now your stencil is dry. And you can ask yourself, from where would you start a design like this? And first, don't forget to shake your inks very well. I will work this whole design with a 5-round liner, and I will show how versatile this needle is and how many different techniques we can do and get to different results and effects to do this one design, using just one needle, one type of needle. So you don't need to set up 2 machines or even change the needles halfway through your work. So we're going to start by outlining this design. We would start now from bottom up, always closer to your hand. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start from right side. So that's where I place my hand. If I was left-handed, I would do on the other side, but I'm right-handed, so this is the side I start. I have to be able to support my hand through the exercise, and every time I finish an area, I can move on to the next and not to lose my stencil during this process. So for this design, I'm going to start for these 2 lower leaves here. I'm going to get some ink on, clean the excess, get the excess out of the needle, and I'm going to start from the lowest possible line closer to my hand. I'm starting this outlining, and just like our training before, when I start losing control, I put my hand up, I get back a little backwards and connect the lines exactly as we were doing before. Now we're just going to apply those techniques to a complete design and see how we can manage them. So lift your hand when you're losing control, get a little bit back, connect the lines and carry on. If you feel like you can pull a longer line, just go as far as you can now. So now for some technical aspects, I'm using a 5.6 voltage on my machine. And what defines the saturation, the thickness of a line, isn't just the voltage. I'll show you now. I'm on 5.6 in a 5-round liner, and I'll show you how the speed of your hand as well influences the saturation of the line. So I'm gonna pull this line really slow, or slower than I usually do, and I'm gonna pull a line a little faster beside. And we're gonna watch how does the ink goes on each place. So same voltage, same needles, and we have a different result just based on the speed in which I move my hand. So this way you can understand that a lot of the effects we do as well are connected to the speed in which we move our hands or in which we do the movements. So we're gonna do this line here, this almost fading. It's very close to my hand, so I wanna get this done faster. So if this was a person, I could, once this is done, I can relax and know that if I have to place my hand over it, I'm not gonna lose the stencil. Okay, so I'm back to this other one because I want to do the bottom part first. Always remember to get more ink. So lines are a combination of voltage, hand speed, needle, and also enough ink on your needles. Now we're gonna do this middle line here. So the same way as before, you pull as much as you can. When you feel you're losing, you pull it up. Go back, not exactly, just a little bit backwards so you can connect and not be visible. And then goes down as much as you can. You pull the line only as much as you're comfortably doing it. So, and you go on connecting those lines on smaller or longer lines, as long as you can pull them, those, and you finish. Note how much I move my hand. So every time I'm going to one side or another, I place my hand again in a different position so it gets more comfortable for me. Always make sure your hand has enough support to bring the lines. If this was real skin, we would be stretching the skin. So with these two fingers or the tree, we don't have to do this on fake skin, but if it was, there was also this other movement of stretching the skin that we would be doing. So we only have to worry about our support to support our hand or common hand really well, but usually you would be working with both hands. We're gonna clean up a little bit so we can see what we're doing. Always use the Vaseline, always very careful not to go over on the stencil because the Vaseline will take the stencil off as well, as you know. So be careful with the stencil, but clean so you can actually see what you're doing. And just be very careful not to damage the stencil that is ready to be worked on, and clean very carefully. See those lines here, I make them quite fast because my intent here is to keep the stencil on, so I have all the lines, and I would do the same if this was a person. I would just line as fast as I can. This is how I usually do, and then I don't have to worry about the stencil any longer, and I can focus on the textures and volume of the design. So we're gonna carry on doing the lines, and you see now how I can put my hand on the leaves that I've done before, and I don't have to worry about the stencil being gone while I'm doing this, because it's already tattooed there. So that's the reason why we start from one side to the other. You can see this happening now. This is not an overly saturated line. This is a line made quite fast, so I can keep the stencil on and work volume and texture on my time afterwards. And now we're just going to finish these lines, and we're going to give it a wipe. We're going to clean. Also being careful with the top lines that are not made yet, they're not done, but we're going to clean so we can have a look on how this all looks now. Again, we're using Vaseline, being careful with the top lines that were not made with ink yet, we're not tattooed yet. And once we're clean, we're gonna have an idea of how these lines are coming out. And I think you all know by now from previous exercises that on artificial skin, on fake skin, to get a more saturated line, you really need to go over quite a few times. On human skin, it's not really like that. Once you touch the skin, usually the skin takes in a lot of ink. So a movement like this one I made of one single pass, one pass of the lines would be enough to have a more saturated line than we're having here. So there's no problem the saturation not be so high. We're gonna finish now the top lines of this design. Now one point of this stencil is that on this round thing, I made a little mark, a smaller circle inside, as you can see here now. And this is where should be no ink whatsoever. So I'm not gonna make this line. I'm just gonna avoid getting there with any ink. And you're gonna understand this when we start the whip shading. This is a mark just for the whip shading, for the shading. It's not an actual line like those I'm making now. So it's just a point for you to pay attention to this little round thing on each of the olives that we have. This is an olive branch, and there is just a point of light, a point where there is going to be no ink.